I am Young Arcader, aka Kada Plus. Please call me Kada. I am here with
Yusuf Abdul Lateef.
And Patricia Nguyen.
and Asa Jackson, who's not going to be using his mic apparently. Uh, we'll see how that goes. Yusuf.
I feels like a dare a little bit.
It is. He said, yeah. Asa's art is just pouring out of his pores. Like he can't, you know what I'm saying?
Can't contain it.
Right. Yusuf.
Yes,
you're
sir.
Coming in behind the artist
Charlie Lambert.
Charlie Lambert. How does it feel to create kind of on top of and around what he's already created?
So, if you look at it like a relay race, right? Charlie basically just runs in everyone's lanes. He does not care. He's the kid that you got the jelly bean jar, you know, and you got to count how many jelly beans are in the jar.
Yeah.
Charlie pushes it over and scatters it. So now you have to deal with it. You got to count them. You got to pick them up. You know, what he did was set the pace, and he set it in such a way that freed me. Oh. You know, like it was a way to, again, pick up pieces, you know? And so as you get to a place, I'm 46, and in a social media space where you get into this comparative thing, you know, you're trying to kind of find where you are, to be able to break that and then rebuild, you know, in those fissures you find like new possibilities. So that his breaking, his level of playfulness and youthfulness really like sparked a thing for me of like making from a vantage point that I'm unfamiliar with, you know.
Got you.
So that was one, like the benefit of the residency in that space and creating this kind of like 3-tiered navigation. And then with the placement of the artist, I don't know how much that was engineered, but just seeing it for what it is objectively, like he, you know, working from his work allowed me to expand. So, yeah.
Nice.
Big ups, Charlie. Baby Jesus.
Baby Jesus. So I think about what you said, and you just knocked over the jar with the jelly beans. So when you normally create, how much is current technology involved in how you create?
That's a good point, or a good question. There are two technologies, I think. And I think it's the tools that I'm using, but then like there's like that technology of language. So, and it's based around my need. So I need to cut a piece of wood. There's this saw out there that if you like fuck up like one bit, like you're gonna lose a limb. And so like you need to know the language of the machine. You need to know like, you know, the embodied knowledge of how, you know, cutting a thing would work and why. And it's like, but then also be outside of, you know, some people need certain tools to do their work, and there's specificity to it. But for me, it's like those tools and technologies are just opportunities for me to break what that really means anyway. So I teach about making in a way that you're just using what's in proximity to you. So whatever it is in proximity becomes your tech, you know. So even if you haven't mastered it or not, you know, because a lot of stuff I don't necessarily know how to use, but if I have a drill, I can put something together, you know.
Got you.
If I have a hammer, I could break something, you know. So, or put something together too. So yeah, And then you go, I got to reboot my website. It's all jacked up. You know what I mean? So then I'm on the computer. I'm going to open up Instagram. And I'm in a rabbit hole from that point on. And it's 8 o'clock at night. So
Got you. Okay. How do you feel about how you create and technology's involvement?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually wanted to build off of what you were saying earlier about like what it means to just use the materials available. Yeah. There's this Cambodian American writer, Anthony Vyasna So, who wrote this New Yorker piece called Duplex, but in it there's a section called Home Depot as Method. And I just really love that because, like, them being Cambodian refugees after the genocide, and then their form of income is like, buying apartment buildings and then renting it back out to Cambodians, but part of that is like fixing it up.
Right.
And so what does it mean when your material is like basic paint, right? Like wall paint or just like scraps of wood, 2x4s and things like that.
Right.
And like how that can be the vehicle for the storytelling, that it's a different way in which we understand like our own material canon in some ways, like that it doesn't have to be fine art in a particular kind of like bourgeois, like trained in the school setting, but like what does it mean when like kids from the hood also have like for me, like growing up in Chicago, like when like my parents are hoarders, I have like a lot of scrap materials around, like how do I find story from that, how do I build from that? And I love the way that you framed thinking about technology through these different languages of the various tools and materials that are available. Because at first when you asked that question, I was thinking, oh, like, do I use like video? Do I use like, AI? Like, do I use all these kind of advancements in these ways? And I'm actually learning towards that in many ways, especially because of the pandemic and what happens. A lot of my work is performance based, and it needs live audience to kind of like breathe with in many ways, right? Like to feel each other's presence in the room, to like feel other people's breath and how they're like kind of ebbing and flowing with your breath as you're performing and moving in certain ways, or just like sweat, right? Like there's a kind of embodied relation. And then when the pandemic happened and we were socially isolated, that strips all of that away, right? And so then I had to experiment with video and film and thinking about how do you not just record performance, because I actually hate my performances being recorded. I'd rather, it's like video is a different medium that plays with time differently and plays with like scale and like detail differently, that to work in video, you actually have to understand video and understand these other kinds of modalities to then be embodied with it instead of using it. So it's not like, here's my body performing and then the video is just this way. It's like, I want to be with the video. Like I want to understand how these technologies work with me instead of for me.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. So by teaching 4D, right, like video is a part of that, and not being familiar with the tech, I offer the kids, hey, use the tech that you know. You have your phone, or you might know videography to an extent, like use it, but like inviting it into the piece, right? Like what kind of camera is that? What is it? What's the even maybe even the back history of the thing. I mean, there's a lot of layers you can go with it in order to, like, the humanity has to be there. Other than that, it's like, oh, the robots are taking over.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if Asa Jackson was using this mic, I wonder what he would have to say about these things. Man.
No, I think that what you were just saying was like you just heard me say I broke my silence already with the But I was saying I really was understanding what you were saying about how to use that film, because it's like, okay, I don't want this to be a stale 1 point or 2 point perspective documentation of a work of art. We have to make the film the work of art. And then my performance becomes an element of the larger work of art. And so my body and the camera becomes a tool in this new presentation.
Yeah.
I dig that. I understood that.
Yeah. Love it. So did you get to see Yusuf create it all while you've been here?
No, it was pretty much, I had finished.
Okay.
I would say yes.
Oh,
You did?
Okay.
But in a different way,
Okay.
like
Okay.
conceptually.
Okay.
Is this a good moment to share the title?
Yeah.
So we came up with the title. Yusuf was talking to me. This is right outside of Cannes, and he was like, "We need to come up with something together." And I was like, "Yeah, together at the end," thinking that we would come together at the end. And he's like, "That's it."
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was this kind of moment where we were just like instantly like connected, because before that we were talking about death and rebirth and like just cycles of life in different ways. And then when you were talking about like, it's like the ends of ropes coming together. So it's like a circle and it continues in a certain way. I mean, you described it way better. But
yeah.
just thinking like for me, when you articulated that you were creating like this worldview that I had a chance to enter into, even though I didn't see you like actively like make. You showed me where the clay was in the dirt in the back, and then you used the shovel. To me, that was like the pre-making, right? Like this is how I found my material.
Yeah.
And then when you conceptualized the rope and the ends, I was like, that's like a different kind of imaginative making.
Wow. Okay, so, yeah.
So I disagree with you.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, that's the title, man.
Together at the end.
Together at the ends. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. What have you already started to formulate? Are you in the ideation process of what you're gonna do with that space now?
I am. It's an interesting place to be in many ways, because Charlie had a blank canvas, and then Yusuf built off of that, right, in many ways, and also is like that imagery of Charlie dumping over that can or like that jar of jelly beans, and then Yusuf scattered it and then created different piles in different ways, and stacked it in different ways, and so like kind of organized that through a different logic, I guess. And then now questions I have for myself is like, how do I put my body in that space? And thinking about my work as a performance artist, but also thinking about archiving, like archiving memory, archiving space, and thinking about just color and scale. There's like all these different questions that are running through my mind, because I was also coming into this thinking, okay, how can I play with the elements of like water, air, fire, like earth? Because all of that is around, right? When you made those, when you dug up for clay, that's like earth in the back.
Right.
But it's like filled with water.
Right.
So you got to burn it to dry it out.
Right.
Right. So all just in that piece, all of that lives, right? Because fire can't live without air. So then I'm like,
That's wild. That's super wild.
so then even just in that, so I'm like, okay, do I work with clay? Do I work with clay on my body? Like, do I just like, or do I like transform the understanding of clay in a different way in the space? Or how do I think about the precarity of the objects that Charlie set up in relation to my body, and in relationship to like how it's racialized and gendered and classed in certain ways, and thinking about all of that. And then thinking about, the anniversary of the end of the Vietnam-American War, 48th year anniversary coming up on April 30th. So trying to, and also, so I'm saying a lot because it's like some of my work is really site specific.
Yeah.
So just thinking about how it's also really, it's located right next to a war museum. And like, what does that mean for me as like a child of refugees who's like the product of war in many ways? And, but then, all these other layered histories that live here, right? Like even in the car ride and talking about the history of like slavery and the history of slavery on top of indigenous land. and then you know, like all these kind of layered ways of understanding relation and like worldviews that have gotten pressed in certain ways, that how do we excavate it in a way that makes it come alive. So I have a lot ahead of me because I'm building off of them and I'm trying to tie it up in some ways.
Awesome. All right, so very last question. That's beautiful. Well, everything's so well put. I love it. I can't wait to listen back myself. So how did you guys hear about the residency at the Contemporary Arts Network?
Morgan from Visible Records. He invited us. Yeah.
I met Morgan some years ago. I did a mural in his building, and we became friends that way and kept coming down and participating in the Visible Records experience. And
So what made you guys say, all right, we're going to do this one. I'm going to do this one? Because I'm sure you guys get offers to other residencies. You know what I mean? So what made you say, all right, this is, I like this?
That's a good question. Well, I'm a Chicago girl. Like, I don't know what it means to live in a small town until recently. I was born and raised there, and I just moved to Charlottesville in the fall. And so I thought this would be an amazing opportunity to, like, see Virginia in a different way and build with the arts community here. And the work that CAN does is just so amazing that part of it is the desire to want to learn more and continue building.
Yeah. Like Morgan called. He was like, "Hey man, you want to go to Virginia, to Hampton?" And before I knew anything about it, I was like, "Yeah." Yes, I was like, "Yeah, man. Let's just give me the date," you know. And so yeah, and then I just you save a lot of time when you know a person. You build that trust because you're like, if you're calling me, because I try to find, I don't really like, I get calls for, people send me calls for residencies all the time. And whatever complacency, procrastination, I end up never filling that stuff out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I end up being invited in this way,
It's nice.
It's like,
Which requires no paperwork.
no paperwork.
It makes life easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a market there. What's that? A agent or manager or? There's something.
It's faith, man.
Okay.
That's the free one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it, man.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Thanks you guys for talking with me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter,
That's
man.
it.